LiberalViewer presents.
So, welcome to the November 7th edition of LiberalViewer Monday Media Mixup, the day before what they're all saying is one of the most important midterm elections in U.S. history. Thanks for joining me. I'll be showing the 11 best most newsworthy clips I picked out from the Sunday morning news analysis shows from the Big Five corporate outlets of ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, and Fox News, the so-called corporate media here in the United States, for what should be a really informative, educational, fair use media criticism and political commentary show for you all this evening. My main topic, of course, with the midterms coming up, the polls will be closing in less than 24 hours in a bunch of states. So it's vote like U.S. democracy is on the ballot, because it may be. And most of my news summaries and newsmaker clips will be on that topic. I think all except for clip 11, which is Chuck Todd Meet the Press cross-examination fail with Rick Scott on whether Republicans are actually going to cut Medicare and Social Security, which maybe that should have been a big message for the Democrats. Maybe they would do better, or maybe they're going to do better than the current polls show, and I'll talk about all of that when we go through the news summaries, where multiple news outlets, not just Fox News, but multiple news outlets are predicting the momentum going for the Republicans in the midterms. But there, as I've talked about for the last several weeks, those polls are really based on a turnout model that may or may not be accurate. That's like the one thing Democrats can hope for, especially if young voters, you're like millennials and Gen Z voters, if they turn out in greater numbers than predicted, that could happen, and that could skew all the Republican wave could be the Democrats keeping the House and the Senate, or keeping the Senate. And although a lot of the models right now show Democrats losing both the House and the Senate. And anyway, does that mean that this is the end of U.S. democracy, as the title of my video? That's, democracy is on the ballot. And what does that mean? It means that many of the candidates that the Republicans have been putting forth actually advocate for only accepting election results when the Republicans win. Honestly, it's about the changing demographics of the United States, where like the Republicans are kind of like the white supremacist party, and they're seeing that there are fewer and fewer white people. I think like by 2040, the United States is not going to be majority white, and so they have to figure out a different way for elections to work other than having like white people electing white people. That's really kind of the subtext of all that's going on here. But that doesn't even necessarily reflect reality, especially given that a lot of the Latino vote and even the black vote is becoming less and less democratic over time. And so the whole demographic inevitability argument that Democrats are going to win all future elections once white people are no longer the majority, that's not even necessarily true. If Republicans would just accept the results of elections and try to win some of those voters on like non-racial issues, because blacks and Latinos, they care about the economy, they care about inflation, they're just, nobody's like a one-issue voter. But anyway, I'm going off on a whole big tangent before I even get to my political comedy, which is actually on the whole democracy on the ballot issue in a way, because it's about Donald Trump. And of course, Donald Trump is the big election denier who tried to plot a coup against the 2020 election results. So his looming presence is one of the reasons democracy is on the ballot. And I wanted to show you this impersonation of Donald Trump by James Austin Johnson this year on Saturday Night Live, is doing the Trump impressions. This is like a skit where, since Twitter is now in the hands of Elon Musk, they have this new content moderation council where people can ask to be reinstated, and they do this parody of Trump asking to be reinstated. But it's going to give me an opportunity to talk about what I think of James Austin Johnson's Trump impression versus the old Alec Baldwin impression. And sorry, going off on my whole tangent at the beginning, or maybe that was really the most important topic, what I was talking about. And this is the diversion from what's important. But Saturday Night Live, who does the best impression and why? I'll talk about it a little more after we watch that clip together over here.
But why do you want to be back on Twitter? I mean, didn't you start your own social media website?
Excuse me. Yes, we've all moved to True Social, and we love True Social. It's very great, and in many ways also terrible. It's very bad. Very, very bad. It's a little buggy in terms of making the phone screen crack and the automatically draining of the Venmo. Anyway, let me back on Twitter. I'll do another Govivi. I won't do anything bad except maybe coup.
All right. Might as well roll the dice, right?
So the thing about the James Austin Johnson impression there, and by the way, the source of all my clips is down in the video description. If you click down there, the first thing you'll see is a short summary of all 11 clips, so you can like click through the video to look for your favorite clip. But down under sources, you can see Saturday Night Live uploads pretty much the entire program in separate little video clips, including that Twitter Council skit that you can watch in full, where the Donald Trump impression is a very short part of it, but you can watch the whole thing if you want, down at the link in the video description. But, I mean, the James Austin Johnson impression is actually a lot more accurate than the Alec Baldwin one. I mean, some of the little mannerisms and the verbal tics in the way he speaks, he gets it like a lot more right, a lot more. It's a much more accurate impression than Alec Baldwin's, but in some ways he still doesn't, in my opinion, really get the essence as much as Alec Baldwin, because James Austin Johnson's Trump seems like smaller, like less threatening, while Alec Baldwin, even though he doesn't get the accent and the like verbal tics exactly right like James Austin Johnson does, he gets like the bombast and the clownishness and the like larger than life. I don't even know how to say it exactly, but I mean, it's kind of weird for like the more accurate impression to be not really as representative of the Trump phenomenon. But that's the point I wanted to make about that impression versus the impression I showed from the impressions I showed of Alec Baldwin during the Trump years that were like so entertaining. I mean, not really like spot on accurate in terms of every single word matching the way Trump would say it, but in some other way, like having more of the essence of Trump. But you can let me know what you think. And Trump is like the big threat to our democracy because he has like been the big promoter of the big lie, and he's promoted all these candidates who are also promoters of the big lie, that the 2020 election was stolen, and more broadly, Republicans don't need to accept or shouldn't accept elections, the results of elections, except where they win, and that you got Kerry Lake in Arizona and Doug Mastriano in Pennsylvania and Ron Johnson in Wisconsin. I'll even show a clip of Ron Johnson a little bit later. If you're following the summaries of the clips that I put down in the video description, you'll see that I have a clip of who is it getting asked about Ron Johnson? The the chair of the Republican National Committee, Ronna McDaniel, is asked about Ron Johnson not accepting his election results unless he wins by Dana Bash on CNN. That's clip number 9, but I'm getting way ahead of myself. I want to show you all the news summaries, mostly from longest to shortest. They're all covering the upcoming midterm elections and the main issues. Some of the news summaries have polls. Some of them talk about who's going to win or who the polls say is going to win. I'll start with NBC News Meet the Press news summary from Chuck Todd. And even, people say NBC has this big bias towards Republicans. Well, if you watch this news summary, Chuck Todd pretty clearly says the final NBC News poll shows momentum with the Republicans, which I will talk about with you a little more after we watch that clip together. The longest news summary. And it's very poll-based. I mean, in some ways, I think the ABC news summary that I'll show you, the fourth one, is the best way to give context to what's coming up this week. But anyway, I'll talk about that a little more after we watch the NBC News Meet the Press news summary together over here.
Good Sunday morning on our 75th birthday from our election headquarters here at Rockefeller Center in New York City. With just 2 days until Election Day, more than 40 million people have already cast ballots in the first national election since the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol. By the way, we expect a record midterm turnout, 120 to 125 million when all the votes are counted. At stake, all 435 House seats. Republicans need a net gain of just 5 to take control of that chamber. It is the smallest number of seats that the out-of-power party has needed since 1932. 35 Senate seats are at stake this cycle. Republicans, of course, need just 1 Democratic seat to flip control of that chamber. There are also 36 governor's races, including in some key 2024 presidential battlegrounds like Arizona, Florida, Georgia, Michigan, Nevada, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. And in our final pre-election poll conducted over the last 3 days, Republicans do appear to have the momentum. Just how big is that momentum? The question is whether Democrats can prevent what former President Obama once called a shellacking. The president's travel in the final stretch says it all about how the Democrats believe the election is going. Outside of the Philadelphia stop with Obama yesterday, President Biden has spent the final days of this campaign not in purple states, but in blue states, California, New Mexico, Illinois, and New York, where he'll be campaigning later today in suburban New York City, Westchester County. And here's why. Biden's job approval rating sits at 44% in this final NBC News poll. By the way, all-time low with independents. His approval rating is just 28%. And let me put this in context for you. What does a job rating mean? Some people believe it's the single most important indicator to understand where a midterm election is going. Bill Clinton's 44% job approval rating translated into a 54-seat loss for his party. A 45% job approval rating for President Obama in 2010 translated to 63 lost House seats. 46% for President Trump, 40 House seat loss for his party. So what will 44% give us? And here's, to me, the number you probably ought to care about the most in this poll. The state of the U.S. economy. 81% tell us they're dissatisfied. This is the second highest number we've ever recorded. The last time it was this high was just before the 2010 election, and you know how that one went. All right, the generic congressional ballot here, we have it dead even, 47-47. It's a slight uptick for the Republicans from 2 weeks ago when it was 47-46. Here's something to keep in mind. Essentially, a tie race probably gives the Republicans the 5 or 6 seats they need. For every percentage point that they lead the Democrats, that's probably anywhere from another 5 to 10 seats that would be added to their total. Just something to watch for on election night. All right, this is key, and this is something that should make Democrats relieved this weekend. Interest in this election, enthusiasm. Democrats have now matched the Republicans dead even. In 2018, they had a slight lead. And of course, the Democrats had the better night. But let me go inside the numbers and why there's still some warning signs here for the Democrats. There are two enthusiasm numbers in particular that I want to highlight here: African American voters and young voters. And as you can see, remember, Democrats had a good night in 2018, and right now African American voters are not quite at their 2018 levels, and young voters are not quite at their 2018 levels. But look at seniors. Seniors are a little bit more. So this is why Republicans feel good about the end of this. We also asked folks to send us what message, if you could send a message with your vote to Congress, what would you say with it? And here's our word cloud response. And as you can see, fix the economy, the #1 message that was sent from voters, and essentially tied for second here, end partisanship and women's rights. So essentially the three big issues of the economy, abortion rights, and the democracy, all represented here, and you can see the voters are engaged on this. By the way, given what happened to Paul Pelosi, we asked voters about the current climate of political violence. Voters are now more likely to view our political rhetoric as an important contributing factor, rather than seeing what happened as some isolated incident. And when we ask who is responsible for this elevated rhetoric, social media companies come out on top, almost universally blamed for our current political climate. Cable news media nearly matches them, then Trump, then Republican officials, Democratic officials, and President Biden there at the bottom. Let's turn back now to the battle for the House, because I want to point out some key numbers here for you to keep track of. In the 7 times since the Truman era, when the president's job rating has been below 50% in his first midterm election, which is what we're staring at with this one, that president's party has lost an average of 43 House seats. And guess what? This cycle, there are 44 Democratic-held seats that are rated as lean or toss-up by the Cook Political Report, and there's just 20 Republican-held seats that are in those same categories in the House battleground. In 2018, you can see it was a much more lopsided battleground here, with the Republicans basically defending almost everything and Democrats barely defending anything. In this cycle, the defense for the Democrats includes the district where Congressman Sean Patrick Maloney is running after redistricting. He also chairs the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, charged with getting House Democrats elected and keeping their majority. And Congressman Maloney joins me now. Welcome back to Meet the Press.
And if there is a red wave, one of the people who might lose is Sean Patrick Maloney. I don't know if there's going to be a red wave, or, I mean, as Chuck Todd explained to you in part of that long news summary, almost every president has lost seats in the House during their first midterm elections. They're just like a couple outliers, including, I remember, George W. Bush right after, in his first midterms after 9/11, he beat the historical average on that. But there are some things that the Republicans are doing that could change the historical trend. I mean, also the inflation numbers don't really favor the party in power, the Democrats, because inflation is at 8% or a little more than 8%. And even though that's a global phenomenon, as I noticed in the live comments there, one of my live viewers was saying, oh, it's Sailing El Azul says, hopefully the electorate knows it's a global recession. And that is true. It's global inflation for sure. I mean, the last GDP numbers for the United States for the third quarter showed 2.6% growth, 2.4% growth. Well, whatever. Our third quarter, we had growth, so that means we're not in a recession. Although I guess now we're in the fourth quarter, maybe they're talking there might be a recession in 2023, but not in the second half of 2022. So technically no recession, but there is really bad inflation and high gas prices, high prices in the grocery store. You're going to see that again reported on. You saw some of that in the NBC News Meet the Press news summary. That's going to be in all the news summaries. Inflation and the economy are big issues with the electorate, although the Biden administration isn't really responsible for most of the inflation. The party in power and presidents get the blame, whether it's their fault or not. That's the way it's always been. That's the way it will always be. And you can't really complain about that. No matter how much you point out that there's inflation all over the world right now, and it's mostly due to the after effects of the pandemic and the ongoing pandemic, and of course the Russian invasion of Ukraine, which is like hugely increasing the price of energy and the price of food. So there's all that. But that was the NBC News Meet the Press news summary. I thought it was like heavily focused on their latest poll, although you'll see that in multiple news summaries. The next one, CBS News Face the Nation. I mean, in some ways, I thought they did a better job. Especially they did a better job if you contrast this next news summary with the Fox News Sunday one. A bunch of the different news programs decided to look at. First, they had their anchor introduce the upcoming midterms, and then they handed off to reporters in various states, Pennsylvania, Georgia, Arizona. You'll see on Face the Nation. I switched the ABC and Fox News one so you could watch two Pennsylvanias in a row. And I think CBS News Face the Nation with Robert Costa reporting from Pennsylvania did a better job than Fox News Sunday with Bryan Llenas reporting from Pennsylvania. And I will talk about that a little more after we watch the news summary from CBS News Face the Nation together. Margaret Brennan, and then Robert Costa in Pennsylvania over here.
Good morning and welcome to Face the Nation. The most important and probably most competitive midterm election in years is now down to the wire. More than 39 million votes have already been cast, and across the country, candidates are out in full force, hoping to persuade the persuadable, turn out their true believers, and perhaps their most difficult challenge, explain to people why this election is so important and why they need to vote. In their words, here is what it comes down to.
They came into office and they created the worst inflation crisis that we have seen in 4 decades.
The Republicans like to talk about it, but what's their answer? What's their economic policy? They want to gut Social Security. They want to gut Medicare. They want to give rich folks and big corporations more tax cuts.
Young couples want to make that first investment for a starter home. They can't afford the interest rates. We have families all over the Commonwealth worried about crime, so much so they won't send their kids outside.
Your right to choose is on the ballot. Your right to vote is on the ballot. There's something else on the ballot. Character. Character's on the ballot.
You heard them say the biggest threat to democracy is voting for the Republican. Are they serious? The biggest threat to democracy is having Joe Biden in the White House.
The main event is Tuesday. Control of the House, which has been shifting in Republicans' favor in these last weeks. They need 5 seats to take over, and control of the Senate, where just 1 turnover will put them on top. We are tracking 10 key battleground races, 5 of which are hotly contested toss-ups. Our Chris Van Cleve is in Arizona. Our Nicole Killian is in Georgia, and our Robert Costa has been reporting in Pennsylvania, and that's where we begin this morning.
It's a choice between 2 vastly different visions of America.
It's a choice that's as competitive as ever. Right now, the Senate race between Republican Mehmet Oz and Democrat John Fetterman could not be closer. 3 presidents barnstormed the state this weekend.
If you want to stop the destruction of our country and save the American dream, then this Tuesday you must vote Republican in a giant red wave.
On the road from the campus of Penn State to the suburbs of Philadelphia, voters told us that the economy is front and center.
Are you feeling economic pain in your life? Yes, I'm a fixed income.
Fetterman, who is recovering from a stroke in May, says that voters who want to blame Democrats for inflation should think again.
What I would say to them is that you need a senator that is going to push back against corporate greed and the kind of price gouging as well too. I mean, like that. This is my point.
Oz has courted frustrated voters. Last night near Pittsburgh, he urged his supporters to win over neighbors by asking them if they're happy with the nation's direction.
I want you to contact 10 people. Do it at church. Do it before the Steelers game. Just find the time.
But the Pittsburgh Steelers don't play this week, and the remark gives Oz's critics another chance to claim he is out of touch.
This is Chris Van Cleve in Arizona.
So yeah, they went to Pennsylvania first, then Arizona and Georgia. The next two news summaries I'm going to show you do just Pennsylvania and Georgia, and the next one is Fox News Sunday with Pennsylvania. Then I'll show you the ABC one with Georgia. But I don't think on the Fox News Sunday news summary you're going to see a clip of Dr. Mehmet Oz getting the Steelers mixed up with what is it, the Falcons, the Phillies? I can't even remember who's supposed to be. I obviously don't live in Pennsylvania, but neither does Mehmet Oz, and I'm not pretending to know all the ins and outs of local Pennsylvania customs, but apparently he got the Steelers aren't playing, and it's just another whole thing about another like crudité misstep from Mehmet Oz that was at least recorded in the Face of the Nation news summary. And if he loses, it's because he's an unlikable outsider who was actually, Oprah, who like launched Mehmet Oz's media career, endorsed John Fetterman in the last couple days. So I hope Mehmet Oz doesn't become a senator. I hope Herschel Walker doesn't, and I'll show you a Georgia report from ABC in the clip after next. But here is Fox News Sunday reporting on the same issues, but of course with the pro-Republican spin that we've come to expect from Fox News. Shannon Bream and then Bryan Llenas from Pennsylvania, not reporting on Mehmet Oz getting the Steelers game time wrong over in this clip.
Hello from Fox News election headquarters in New York. After months of predictions and uncertainty, midterms are finally here, and much of the focus is on the balance of power on Capitol Hill. So let's take a look at where things stand right now. Democrats hold an 8-seat advantage in the House, and the Senate remains in that 50-50 split, with the vice president giving Democrats the deciding vote when necessary. Now, all of this could change. Right now, Fox News power rankings predict voters will give 47 Senate seats to the Democrats and 49 to the Republicans. That leaves 4 toss-up races to decide control, meaning the Senate could go either way. This hour, we will break it all down for you with guests from both parties, as well as a team of pollsters and Fox News Sunday's senior political analysts. But we begin with team coverage from states with must-watch Senate and gubernatorial races. Aisha Hasni live in Atlanta. But first, Bryan Llenas is live in Philly on what has become the biggest Senate race. Bryan?
Shannon, with Pennsylvania's Senate race essentially tied, former President Obama, former President Trump, and President Biden made their closing arguments in the Commonwealth on behalf of Democratic Lieutenant Governor John Fetterman and Republican Dr. Mehmet Oz.
Democrats up and down the ballot. We need to elect them all. We need it badly.
John's stroke did not change who he is. It didn't change what he cares about. It didn't change his values, his heart, his fight.
Pennsylvania desperately needs Dr. Oz in the U.S. Senate. He could very well be the tie-breaking vote.
Fetterman has made this race a referendum on Dr. Oz's personality and character while promising to fight for abortion rights and raise the minimum wage. Oz has made it a referendum on Biden while promising to lower crime and inflation. This race could be decided in Philadelphia's suburbs, where gubernatorial candidate Doug Mastriano's far-right politics could hurt Oz. Control of the U.S. Senate is at stake, but it could take days before we know the winner, thanks to Pennsylvania's mail-in ballot process and the threat of looming legal battles. Shannon?
All right, we'll track it all. Bryan Llenas reporting from Pennsylvania. Thank you very much. Let's turn to Aisha Hasni now live in Atlanta. Hello, Aisha.
And I'm following my usual practice of only showing the anchor and then the first reporter they talk to. And you saw, I think, the report from Pennsylvania, Bob Costa in Pennsylvania on CBS, was much more journalistic than what you saw from Bryan Llenas on Fox News Sunday. I think that was much more stilted in favor of Dr. Mehmet Oz. You can let me know what you think in the comment section. But I don't have the Aisha Hasni report on Georgia, but I do have in the ABC This Week with George Stephanopoulos news summary. This is actually Martha Raddatz, the co-host, and she has their reporter Steve Osunsami, I think I'm pronouncing that right, talking about the Georgia race and the ridiculous poll results that show that people in Georgia are actually willing to vote for Herschel Walker, who's shown himself to be said the most ridiculous things on so many issues, has been shown to be a huge hypocrite in terms of the abortion issue. That's one of the things I see on Fox News all the time. Like the Governor Gavin Newsom went to the restaurant that's called this high-end restaurant in Napa Valley called the Laundry, or the French Laundry here in California, and didn't wear a mask when he was saying everyone else should wear a mask. And that was rules for thee and not for me. How many times did I hear rules for thee and not for me on Fox News when Gavin Newsom didn't wear a mask in this high-end restaurant he went to? But Herschel Walker, first of all, has all these kids that he doesn't claim and doesn't raise in the party of family values, where he's claiming to be a warrior for Christ. And then multiple women come out and say that he pressured them to get abortions when he believes in no right to an abortion, no exceptions. And what happened to rules for thee and not for me, or rules for thee and not for me, that I hear on Fox News all the time when it comes to Democrats? But Herschel Walker, pretty much crickets. But I don't have the Aisha Hasni report, where she actually did briefly mention the accusations, and then of course said Herschel Walker denies these accusations. But here's the ABC report that I will talk about with you a little more after we watch it together over here.
Welcome to This Week. With just 2 days until the midterms and nearly 40 million votes already cast, Tuesday is shaping up to be a nail-biter. Election officials are preparing for what could be a long night in contests across the country. As votes come in, there is a very real possibility outcomes will appear to favor one party at the start, but crown another later on. And election night might, like 2020, extend for days. And all of that, it's worth noting, is okay, not a sign the system has broken. In this historic election, political campaigns and outside groups have spent nearly $3 billion on a record number of television ads as rhetoric has become increasingly toxic, leading to voter intimidation and a rise in violence. It was just over a week ago that Paul Pelosi was brutally attacked in his home and is now in for a long recovery. We have every angle covered this morning, including a brand new ABC News Washington Post poll showing widespread economic discontent. 80% of voters say the economy is a top issue, with nearly half of Americans saying that they're worse off financially than they were 2 years ago. And Republicans have a clear advantage when it comes to trust over handling of the economy, voters preferring Republicans by 14 points. It's what pollsters call political poison. We'll speak exclusively with top Democratic Senator Cory Booker and Republican Governor Glenn Youngkin in a moment. But first, we're fanned out across the country in key battleground states that will decide control of Congress. We begin this morning with Steve Osunsami in Georgia. Good morning, Steve.
Good morning to you, Martha. Some of the latest polling has the race between incumbent Senator Raphael Warnock and college football great and Republican nominee Herschel Walker at essentially a tie. And this is despite weeks of bad press for Herschel Walker, who's essentially been called a hypocrite because of his stance on abortion rights, even though woman after woman has come forward claiming that he either helped them get an abortion or paid for one. There is a libertarian candidate in this race, and in Georgia, to win on Tuesday night, the winner has to get above 50%. And right now, many people are expecting this to possibly go to a runoff, which frankly would be 4 weeks of more misery for Georgia voters who are frankly tired of all the mudslinging. There has been record voting in this race. About 2.5 million people have voted early. And election officials expect that when the votes are tallied on Tuesday night, the total vote will be higher than the 4 million votes cast in the midterms 4 years ago, but lower than the 5 million votes cast during the presidential election. Surprises do happen. One could happen here. Democrats here are hoping that the polling is wrong and that their candidate wins. Herschel Walker's people are happy that college football is in the air and UGA could be ranked #1 this week, and they're hoping that it helps them. Martha.
Thanks, Steve. Surprises do happen. Let's turn now to Philadelphia, where our Eva Pilgrim is standing by. Good morning.
And yeah, if you want to see the whole ABC This Week with George Stephanopoulos, where they talk about what's going on in Pennsylvania, and then you can compare it to the CBS and Fox News coverage of Pennsylvania, well, like I said, down under sources in the video description, I put the source of all my video clips, including a link to watch the entire episode of ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos. You might have to have like a cable subscription or create some kind of account or something in order to access it in the first week, or where I don't even know all the rules to look at all those sources, but I provide them and then you can figure it out. But I think that the ABC This Week with George Stephanopoulos news summary there from Martha Raddatz was had like the best setup for what people may actually experience tomorrow and in the coming weeks, where these elections are possibly very close. Nobody knows what's going to happen. It may take a while to count. It may take, it may look like somebody's winning at the beginning, and then when more election day votes come in, it will change from the mail-in votes to the election day votes, or who knows which votes get counted first. So you shouldn't assume anything right based on the first counting of the votes that comes out right when the polls close tomorrow. I mean, that can be deceptive, and I appreciate ABC and Martha Raddatz for making that clear, because sometimes they go the other way and you have to wait till they have time to count all the votes. Like in Pennsylvania or in various places, they wait a few days just to see if more absentee ballots come in the mail, and that's part of the process. That doesn't mean there's something wrong. You shouldn't expect necessarily to have the results the night of the election, and maybe next Monday when I'm doing my live stream, we won't even know the results of the House, or especially the Senate. You saw that if there's not a majority, since there's a libertarian candidate in Georgia, that could mean that neither Herschel Walker nor the incumbent senator, Reverend Raphael Warnock, neither one of them wins. So then we have to wait till December 6th. So to find out who controls the Senate, if that's the seat that actually ends up controlling. Who knows? I mean, we may know a lot more next Monday, but maybe we won't. And so kudos to ABC for pointing that out. And then here is the final news summary, the shortest one, from CNN State of the Union. Dana Bash also pointing out that the momentum seems to be on the side of Republicans, if you believe the polls. And there's some reasons to believe the polls, some reason to think that the universe of likely voters is skewed against people who might be voting now who weren't likely to vote before because of the high voter enthusiasm. And anyway, I'll talk about that a little more maybe after we watch that final news summary together over here.
Hello, I'm Dana Bash in Washington, where the State of our Union is hours away from counting the votes. We are 2 days from finishing a marathon of a campaign that's twisted and turned and is now coming to a close. Saturday, we saw 3 presidents in Pennsylvania, Biden, Trump, and Obama, trying to give a final boost to their party and, for Biden and Trump, flex their own political muscle ahead of a possible 2024 rematch. But in the closing days of this midterm race, outrunning history appears extremely difficult for Biden and his party. Democrats are playing defense in bright blue states, New York, California, Oregon, and Washington, while Republicans are on offense, feeling confident that a House takeover seems likely and that a Senate flip is very possible. The polls, all of them, show Americans are thinking about inflation and the economy, and that Republicans win the trust battle on kitchen table issues. So let's bring in a Republican who has been all across the country preparing for Tuesday night. Here with me now is the chairwoman of the Republican National Committee, Ronna McDaniel. Thank you for coming on.
And I will have a clip of Republican National Committee Chair Ronna McDaniel answering some cross-examination from Dana Bash on CNN about the Republican election deniers. And I mean, that is why democracy is really on the ballot. And I'm going to show you 2 clips that really exemplify that, or really explain it, I guess I should say. And I mentioned it at the beginning of the live stream that if that's one of the ways democracies can die, is if people vote in through the democratic process. People can vote in people, politicians, representatives who don't believe in democracy, who don't believe in accepting the results of elections if their party doesn't win. I mean, the clip after next is actually going to be Representative James Clyburn defending his analogy to Nazi Germany, how Hitler was actually elected, and his National Socialist Party, National Socialist German Workers' Party, came in and he became chancellor in a coalition government, and then dismantled the democracy that elected him. And Mussolini was elected. Fascists can get elected and then dismantle the democracy that elected them, and that's the threat to democracy that we're talking about. And the first 2 newsmaker clips I'm going to show you now make that point. Cory Booker and then James Clyburn. And then in response, I'm going to show you 3 Republicans trying to do a whole bunch of whataboutism and changing the subject. And I'll really criticize what Ronna McDaniel and Chris Sununu, governor of New Hampshire, and then Rick Scott, senator from Florida, they try to downplay the democracy on the ballot issue without really addressing it. I've seen this on Fox News today, and this is their big talking point. They're saying democracy on the ballot. Well, the ballot is democracy. Voting, how can the Democrats say that voting for Republicans is a subversion of democracy? Because that's a vote, and that's what democracy is. But the point is, if you vote for people who don't believe in democracy, who are going to end democracy, who say that only when their party wins, that those are the only election results they accept, that's how voting can end democracy. And anyway, here is Cory Booker and then James Clyburn. But here's Cory Booker making that point over on, it was CNN's State of the Union, right? No, on ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos. He's making the point about democracy being on the ballot. And then Martha Raddatz, because she is a good journalist, cross-examines him about whether Democrats are making that argument, but it's not a winning issue. And you can see him answer that criticism, and I'll talk about it a little more with you after we watch that clip together over here.
To Pennsylvania, people have real stark choices. Out in Arizona, they have choices between somebody that wants to preserve our democracy, bring people together, versus a type of brand of politics really that undermines our democracy. There's a lot on the line, and we have to remember, after what we saw at January 6th, Republican or Democrat, we should be electing people that believe in our democracy, that believe in our traditions, and that ultimately want to unite people and not divide them. There's a culture of contempt in this country. You're seeing election workers get increased threats. You're seeing judges get increased threats. Heck, you're even seeing members of Congress, as we saw what happened with Paul Pelosi. Something is going wrong in our country where rising political violence, rising threats are really threatening who we are as a people. And I hope as people go to the polls, they elect folks that want to unite us, not divide us, that want to bring people together to focus on our common cause, not really be about contempt and anger.
But
this is
Senator,
a time for us to have sound government.
Senator, as we said, the economy is the top issue for 80% of Americans in our ABC Washington Post poll. And yet this week, and you're talking about this too, you had President Biden give a major speech on saving democracy, barely mentioning the economy or crime. Obviously, democracy is an important issue, but was that the right thing to be stressing at this moment in the midterms when so many Americans are worried?
You know, I've stood side by side with Catherine Cortez Masto in Nevada or Mark Kelly in Arizona, side by side with candidates Tim Ryan in Ohio. Every single one of them is talking about kitchen table issues. And when things are really stressed, which party has your back? Prescription drug costs, Democrats lowering them. Healthcare costs, Democrats lowering them. When it comes to creating good union jobs, we were the party that didn't just talk about infrastructure week, but got the biggest infrastructure bill, investments in our communities that we've seen in generations. At the end of the day, one party has shown when they were in power, they're giving the biggest tax cuts and tax breaks to the wealthiest. The other party, we were one vote shy of passing the biggest middle-class tax cut and working-class tax cut in American history, making the child tax credit permanent.
But
so
Senator, the
polls
have tightened. The polls have tightened. What about the messaging? Alyssa Slotkin from Michigan, one of the most vulnerable members of Congress, told the New York Times, the truth is Democrats have done a poor job of communicating our approach to the economy. If you can't speak directly to people's pocketbook and talk about our vision for the economy, you're just having half a conversation. Did Democrats miscalculate just how important this issue is?
You know, again, I'm looking at the Tip O'Neill saying all politics is local. And when I've stood with House members who are running for re-election and senators, I know what their messaging is. I know what their closing argument is that when this country is going through tough times, whether it's a pandemic or inflation rising, who is really going to have your family's back? And I've heard people show receipts of what we've accomplished in terms of helping to lower costs and really a firm message. We were one vote shy, as I said, of the biggest middle-class tax cut, one vote shy of protecting fundamental rights. The individual people I see out there campaigning are speaking towards the pocketbooks of this country and reminding people about what Donald Trump's agenda was when he had the reins, not just economic policy that favored the rich, but also things that undermined our very fundamental beliefs as a democracy.
Okay, we thank you so much for joining us this morning, Senator.
So yeah, there's Cory Booker, I think, both defending the idea that democracy is on the ballot, but he also did kind of the pivot there you saw at the end where he tried to talk about democracy being on the ballot and our fundamental rights, including abortion and also our, right to fight these tax cuts for the rich, because that's one of the other points that Democrats should be making more strongly, that if you don't have elections matter anymore, if you let an oligarchy or some, fascist minority take over our government and no longer accept the results of elections, well, that's one of the ways that working people get to express their dissatisfaction with a system that favors the rich, which is one of the things that Republicans, whenever they get in power, they always like cut taxes for the rich and the big corporations, and that's the point that Cory Booker was also making, that it all comes together: the economic issues, the abortion issue, the issue of no more elections that are respected by the opposition party when they lose. It all comes together into like a loss of the type of, liberal democracy. Liberal democracy meaning a democracy that respects the rights of all of its all of the people who live within it. That's constitutional, liberal. That's what liberal means for people who don't know. You should know, since you're watching the LiberalViewer channel. But Cory Booker did a good job there, and this is like one of the most ridiculous cross-examinations. This next clip, Shannon Bream cross-examining James Clyburn, Representative James Clyburn, who like helped Biden get in, because he's from South Carolina and he endorsed Biden, and he got basically the black vote to come out for Biden in South Carolina that kind of saved his 2020 presidential campaign. So he has a lot of power in the Democratic Party, I guess, and he is definitely a messenger for this threat to democracy message. Earlier in the week, he talked about what I was saying earlier, how that's how a lot of democracies have died, including, Weimar Germany, where they voted Hitler into power, and then he dismantled their democracy. And he did do this one hyperbole thing where he said, it's the end of our democracy, end of the world. And that's the thing that Fox News really focused on. And they never really even talk about I guess Shannon Bream did her job in creating a distraction from what he was really saying. And this is actually something I studied pretty extensively. I mentioned before I have a history degree from Yale University, and I studied a lot, especially 20th century military history, and including World War II. I think, over here I have, read this 800 plus page book, Germany 1866 to 1945. This was one of the textbooks in one of my history courses that I took, in Gordon Craig's voluminous history of how, what James Clyburn is talking about is documented extensively in this book. You want to read about what happened in Germany, 1866 to 1945? They voted away their democracy. That's how democracy can be on the ballot. And if you think it can't happen here, well, it could happen here. If you don't want it to happen here, vote. Vote against people who lie about the results of the election. And anyway, that's my intro to James Clyburn. And kudos to James Clyburn for picking out one of those shirts. This shirt is, it's not exactly like his shirt, but I'm trying to go as close to his Hawaiian shirt choice as I can, because I'm a big fan of James Clyburn. Not so much Shannon Bream, which I will talk about a little more after we watch this clip together over here.
Okay, so I want to play a little bit more language over the last week from Democrats about what is at stake in this election.
Democracy as we know it may not survive in Arizona. That's not an exaggeration. That is a fact.
But there's something else at stake. Democracy itself.
But losing this democracy could very well be the end of the world.
Okay, so are you asking voters to set aside what they feel about the economy? Because the Wall Street Journal, Kimberly Strassel has this piece. Voters have sat through this apocalyptic movie many times now and know it's anticlimactic ending. Besides, they're busy searching for spare change to cover their rising grocery bill. So set aside the economy, worries about crime, which are at the top of all of voter polls about what they're worried about, and instead vote for you or the world is ending?
Nobody's saying the world is ended.
You did
The
say
world
there,
will
though,
not end.
it could be the end of the world.
No, democracy will be ended. The world will continue to exist. The world was here before Hitler. The world was here after Hitler. That's what we're saying. No, the world will not end. The kind of world we have, the kind of country we have, we've got to decide how do we want to exist in this world. And that's what we're talking about. This hyperbole is not a part of what we are saying here. We're talking about what kind of country we have and what kind of world we have.
Okay, Congressman, just to be clear, though, I want to read your quote. It says, but losing this democracy could very well be the end of the world. That's a direct quote from you.
End of the world? Come on.
Well, a lot of voters feel that way. When you say that, they think they have the same reaction.
Well, if that's a quote from me,
Yes, sir.
I misspoke. It won't end the world. No.
Okay, well, that's good news for everyone heading to the ballot boxes on Tuesday.
But having
Finally,
been one to teach history, we live in worlds that we do not like. My forebears lived through slavery. They did not like that existence for 250 years. But it was not the end of the world. It may be the end of the world as they would have it, but it will not end the world.
all right. Well, we are reassured to hear you say that, sir. We thank you for making time for us, Congressman Clyburn. Always good to talk with you.
Thank you very much for having me.
Okay, back now with our Sunday group. All right.
And then they come back to their Sunday group where Brit Hume comments on James Clyburn's choice of shirt. But they don't really talk. They make fun of him for talking about the end of democracy and, of course, the end of the world, which apparently he didn't back up. I don't know what he was talking. I tried to find the context of that end of the world quote from the previous Tuesday. I couldn't find the full interview, but whatever. James Clyburn wouldn't even defend his own comment there, but called it hyperbole. But Fox News, of course, used that one piece of hyperbole to make sure that they didn't spend a lot of time talking about his main point, which was what I was talking about before the clip, that democracies can die when a majority of voters decide to vote in people who are running on a position of dismantling the democracy, not respecting the results of elections, and only having elections where their party wins in the future. That's, what that dude in Arizona running for Secretary of State, whose name escapes me, promised it. If I win, only Republican. No, or was that in Wisconsin? I can't remember. When. There's so many election deniers, I can't remember which is which. But speaking of election deniers, I've shown you two Democrats, but to be fair and balanced, as they say, I guess, I'm now going to show you three Republican newsmakers to balance out those two Democrats. First, RNC Chair Ronna Romney. Donald Trump made her get rid of her Romney, but her real name is Ronna Romney McDaniel. But now she goes by Ronna McDaniel. I don't want to dead name her, give her the dead name that she had to kill because of Donald Trump. But yeah, so Ronna McDaniel, the head of the Republican National Committee, tries to downplay the election denialism amongst Republicans. Then I'm going to show you Chris Sununu, who's one of the more rational Republican, Trump denial Republicans, kind of melting down. I've heard, well, that's what they said on Morning Joe. I don't think he really melted down, but he didn't give a good argument. And then Rick Scott, well, that's not even on election denialism. That's like a Chuck Todd Medicare Social Security fail for the final clip. But first, here's Ronna Romney. Oh, sorry, I dead named her. Ronna McDaniel, the chair of the Republican National Committee, responding to cross-examination from Dana Bash on CNN's State of the Union about Ron Johnson of Wisconsin claiming he'll only respect the results if he wins. Otherwise, there's all sorts of Democratic shenanigans going on, and I'll talk about that a little more after we watch that clip together over here.
To do that, I want you to listen to what Republican Senator Ron Johnson said on whether he will accept his own election results.
I sure hope I can, but I can't predict what the Democrats might have planned. We're not trying to do anything to gain partisan advantage. We're just doing whatever we can to restore confidence.
So simple yes or no. Should Republican candidates, Ron Johnson, all of them, accept election results?
Well, I would say the same to Stacey Abrams, right? Or Hillary Clinton, who's already saying in 2024, we're going to rig the election. That's not helpful. Listen, you should have a recount, you should have a canvass, and it'll go to the courts, and then everybody should accept the results. That's what it should be. But I'm also not going to say if there's problems that we shouldn't be able to address that. Mm-hmm. If there's real problems, everyone should be able to address that. And I think Ron Johnson and Stacey Abrams, in the end, once all their avenues are exhausted, right, they'll accept the results.
But you're saying, because this is very important. For example, I'll just tell you what Joe O'Dea, one of your, what the Republicans consider a star candidate in Colorado, he's running for Senate. He said, after the process is done and the votes are counted, I'll absolutely accept the outcome. It's time for American leaders to start acting like adults again. Is that what you want to hear? And is that your message?
Yeah, and I think that's what Ron said, too.
No, he didn't.
I think
no, he didn't.
Saying...
He said that he's predicting that Democrats are going to be involved in things, which is not fair. But we're going to pursue problems. If you have a problem, I'll give you an example. In Virginia last year, they wouldn't let people vote who weren't wearing a mask. That's not the state statute. So there were people actually being denied voting because they didn't have a mask on. That wasn't the law. So because of our lawyers that we had on the ground, we quickly called the election officials in the state of Virginia, and we got that fixed. But we need to have that ability to fix it. And every election's run differently at the county level, at the precinct level. So we want to make sure it's run fair and transparently, and then we'll let the process play out, and then we'll accept the results. Okay. That's exactly what I was just going to put a button on. When the process is played out and the votes are canvassed and certified, every one of your Republican candidates will accept their results, even if they lose.
They will. And here's what I'm going to say, too. Everybody's talking about this election denier. This is the language. I just heard it on the segment before. Democrats, I have 150 examples. I've got a 10-minute video of Democrats denying elections from 2000 to 2020. This is not what the American people are caring about right now. And let me tell you what they are worried about. Our commander-in-chief, Joe Biden, going in front of the American people and talking about this and saying, oh, look at these issues with election deniers. Well, here's what the Democrats are. They are inflation deniers. They are crime deniers. They are education deniers.
But this is
literally.
Okay, but this is.
But this is not what the American people are talking about. They're not talking about.
I don't want to have.
But they're not voting on that.
Okay, we've been having, and I just did this, and we're doing so many reports about the issues, which is important. But I'm talking to you.
Deanna,
but I'm talking to you as the
5 days out
Republican
from an
national
election for the President of the United States to give a speech and not talk about inflation, to actually say it's good, to not talk about gas prices, to say that crime doesn't exist.
I'm not here. I'm not.
So they have become crime deniers, inflation
I'm not
deniers,
here. Okay.
and education deniers.
Ronna, I'm not
that's
a.
the big
I am
issue.
not. I'm not a spokesperson for.
I know,
anybody and for them, but I will just say that was a speech, and they're out giving other speeches.
But
I want to talk about
presidents.
He's out giving other speeches.
Message.
I don't want you to put me in a position of having to defend them, but I'm explaining and I'm giving you the facts. And the fact is that is one speech, and he's giving other speeches. I want to ask you about Donald Trump.
Yeah,
good.
Yeah, I'm saying we're going to accept it.
That's the headline.
But here's what I would say to Joe Biden. Can you please accept that inflation has risen on your watch, that kids have deficits on your watch, that our borders open, that fentanyl's coming across?
I want to ask about looking forward.
That crime is rising?
As your position is so important as the chair of the RNC, Donald Trump.
And there she's asking about Donald Trump declaring his run to be president in 2024. Apparently that might happen a week from today, so maybe I'll get to cover it next Monday for my live stream. You know, I'm going to continue doing this live stream through the end of the year and probably for another couple of years through 2024. I'll talk about that later. But Ronna McDaniel did so much whataboutism, and this whole they're trying to create this whole other talking point where, like, oh, election denialism, where people we elect deny that democracy should be respected and that we should respect the results of elections when we lose, that denialism should be the same as denying inflation, denying crime, denying parents access to education, like all these like policy disputes that where Republicans have like ginned up like people's outrage over like non-existent issues, cultural issues. Like that's the same as wanting to elect people who don't accept the results of elections. And Dana Bash, I don't think, did the greatest job of cross-examining on that. Here is Margaret Brennan trying to cross-examine Chris Sununu about the election deniers in the Republican Party, that Chris Sununu isn't one of them, but here is Margaret Brennan playing a clip of President Joe Biden's last speech before the midterms, talking about the threat to democracy that's on the ballot. And I'll talk about Chris Sununu's response a little more after we watch that penultimate newsmaker clip together over here.
President Biden, in one of his closing arguments, is framing this election as protecting democracy against extreme Republicans. Listen.
The extreme MAGA element of the Republican Party, which is a minority of that party, as I said earlier, but is this driving force, is trying to succeed where they failed in 2020, to suppress the right of voters and subvert the electoral system itself.
Do you agree that parts of your party are emboldening violence and posing a threat to democracy?
Look, what is shocking to me about all of this is you have the Democrat Party, which is now using the President of the United States, not as leader of our country, but leader of their party, as a political tool right before the election to drive and effectively tell half of America that they're too extreme for America.
You think the MAGA element of the Republican Party is half of America? Because I wouldn't necessarily put you in that half.
No, well, definitely not. But again, to say that extremism belongs in one party and it doesn't appear in the Democrat Party is nonsensical.
You're
Nobody
saying
buys
the party's
that
all
because we
one
see
now,
it on both
unified.
sides.
That extreme MAGA is part of the Republican Party's ideology?
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. No,
but it seemed like that's what you're
an absolute
implying.
minority. But what I'm saying is extreme. No, definitely not. Extremism is on both sides. And for the President of the United States to come up and be more of a political tool as opposed to a uniter. Remember, he got elected because he said he was going to unite folks, not threaten them. He was going to bring everybody together and get stuff done and not polarize this country, which is exactly what has happened. Okay. If that was not the reality, then Democrats wouldn't be in for the rude awakening that it's going to come Tuesday. But it is coming. And not because of politics, because of what is happening in people's homes, what's happening at their kitchen tables, what's happening with trying to balance a checkbook. And the president has to take a lot of responsibility for that. It's easy to blame extremism, but most of us are not extreme.
Okay, well.
So, I don't know. I mean, I think Margaret Brennan did an okay job, but there was a whole bunch of whataboutism and, voter ID and ballot harvesting, and you'll hear some of that you would have heard some of that with Rick Scott if I showed you Chuck Todd cross-examining him on that issue. Those seem to be the Republican talking points. Ballot harvesting, ballot harvesting is the practice of people who are into getting out the vote and making sure the most people possible have access to the ballot, where if people aren't able to get out of their houses or out of their nursing homes or whatever, but they want to vote, people will come and take their ballots and mail them or bring them to ballot drop boxes or whatever. And I mean, that's a good thing to I don't know why Republicans call that ballot harvesting. That's where you get people to go out and collect ballots from people who wouldn't otherwise be able to vote if someone didn't come and get their ballots from them. That's a bogus criticism. I hate ballot harvesting is one of the terms I hate the most that Republicans are harping on. And voter ID, I've made videos about that in the past, that the in-person, there is like almost no incidence of in-person voting fraud, where people like show up to the polls and claim to be a voter but they're not, and then vote. I mean, if mail-in ballots and absentee ballots actually are more prone to fraud, not that there's evidence that they were used for fraud in the 2020 election. The only like big documented case I remember, I think, was in North Carolina, where Republicans used absentee ballots to commit fraud, but I don't want to go off on that big tangent. But voter ID stops. There are people who can't get voter IDs, who like can't afford it, don't have access to their birth certificates. It disproportionately impacts young people, senior citizens who were like born a long time ago and the records aren't available, and also people of color have less access to, and poor people have less access to IDs and the ability to, sometimes the place where you get your ID so that you can vote is like far away and not open very often and hard to access. And so there are a lot of reasons that voter ID is suppressive of voters, and there's a lot of reasons why the whole ballot harvesting thing is a bogus argument, as I was saying. But anyway, I wanted to say that after showing those two Republican clips talking about whataboutism in terms of what stops voters, but this last clip is actually maybe an argument that Democrats should have made more strongly, in terms of the guy in this next clip, the senator from Florida, Rick Scott, who is the senator in charge of getting Republicans elected to the Senate. He came out with this plan saying, every 5 years we should sunset Social Security and Medicare and make Congress vote to authorize it again, or it goes away, even though people work for like their whole working lives so that they get Social Security and Medicare when they retire at 65 or 67 or 70, or who knows what age they're going to increase it to. And even the like Republican contract with America, or whatever they're calling it, for 2022, where they promise to like save and strengthen Social Security and Medicare, what they're really saying is they're going to cut the benefits so that it lasts longer. And that is sort of the undercurrent of what Rick Scott is talking about. But the real failure here, and I know I've sometimes tried to defend Chuck Todd on NBC News' Meet the Press, but he's just not really good at cross-examination, which is something I know a little bit about, having worked for like 5 years as a criminal defense attorney and public defender, that are like my strongest skill was cross-examination of police officers, where you have to like break down their like bogus claims so that it is so the truth is available for all to see. And Chuck Todd is not a great cross-examiner. And here, I mean, he almost brings out the truth of what Rick Scott is saying. What Rick Scott is saying is there's this Republican talking point under the Inflation Reduction Act. One of their achievements, the Democrats passed with no Republican support, the Inflation Reduction Act, that gives Medicare the ability to negotiate with the pharmaceutical companies to lower drug prices. And as a result of that, the Congressional Budget Office says, we're going to save, what is it, like $280 billion, because we're not going to let the pharmaceutical companies like jack up the prices on the U.S. government more than like all other countries. In the United States, we pay way more for drugs than people do in all the other countries, and Medicare has a huge ability to use, volume to negotiate those prices. And Republicans and Democrats have, historically been in favor of giving Medicare the ability to negotiate lower prices with drug companies. But Republicans have decided that the Inflation Reduction Act that finally made that possible, because it's going to cut the price of drugs by $280 billion, that's a cut in Medicare. That's what Chuck Todd is trying to make clear in this next clip, but he doesn't really make it as clear as I just made it. I don't think so, but you can let me know what you think after we watch that final newsmaker clip together over here.
Let me ask you, you've been asked a million different ways about Social Security. You know the Democrats want to bring this issue up. Sunsetting the program every 5 years for renewal. Why do that? Why put Social Security into sort of the political, into the political arena every 5 years? Why put seniors through that? Why do you think that's a good idea?
I have no interest in changing the Medicare program. I want to make sure we preserve the benefits of Medicare and Social Security. I don't know one Republican wants to change that. In my plan, I said we have got to start being honest with the public that what's our plan. Medicare is going bankrupt. Social Security is going bankrupt. Here's what the Democrats did. They just cut $280 billion. Every Democrat that's running right now in the Senate, okay, and those in the House, they all voted to cut $280 billion out of Medicare, which is going to cut life-saving drugs. They did this.
You're playing a math game. You are playing a math game there, Senator.
He didn't pay his taxes.
Senator, you're playing a math game here. You're playing a math game. They didn't cut anything on Medicare. It's cost savings having to do with the prescription drug benefit. Look, I understand that you want to call it something else, but
Chuck, if you cut spending in Medicare, it's probably going to impact the ability for somebody to provide things. When you cut out $280 billion, there's a life-saving drug that your mom will not get. That's what's going to happen.
All right, I will remember this when you guys claim a Medicare cut isn't a cut.
$280 billion out of Medicare reduction is going to cut life-saving drugs. That's bad for citizens. It's real simple.
All right, I want to ask you something that Marjorie Taylor Greene said at a Trump rally 4 days ago. Take a listen.
And yeah, that next question was about whether Republicans are going to want to cut aid to Ukraine, because that's what Marjorie Taylor Greene said, that, if Republicans take control of the House, no more money to Ukraine. But if you want to watch Rick Scott's answer on that, you can check the Meet the Press link in the video description under sources. But am I right? Chuck Todd didn't really make clear that the ability of Medicare to negotiate lower drug prices is what Republicans are claiming is a cut to Medicare. I mean, he kind of said it, but not really that clearly. And anyway, that is the last clip I wanted to show you. That's the end of the program. I will be back next Monday, November 14th, which apparently may be the day that Donald Trump is announcing he's running for president in 2024. And I'll discuss, I'll keep doing this Monday live stream through the end of the year and discuss whether I'll keep doing it through 2024, which seems more and more likely. But anyway, I hope you appreciate all the time and effort I put into putting out this live stream and the clips I picked out, and I appreciate all of you who joined me for the live stream and my recorded show viewers. And until next week, or until I have some other reason to upload a video or create a live stream, maybe to talk about the results of the election, who knows. But until any of those things happen, I guess I will be seeing all of you around the internet.